Spanish GDP figures have regained stance prior to the 2008 economic crash. So what does this positive data mean for Spain and the Eurozone? I'm Jessica Walker, and today I'm joined by Vasileios Douzenis from Europe Economics to discuss. So Vasileios, Spanish GDP has continued to increase and it now currently stands at 0.9% quarter on quarter. 0.9% was the average increase for 14 years prior to the economic crash. Has Spain's economic recovery finally gathered the momentum it's needed?
Okay, so let's start off by saying that by looking at the 14-year period average, we cannot readily make comparisons based on the current only one quarterly observation that we have. I'd say that to determine whether momentum is building up, we will need to look at the following things, which I'm going to explore here. And these are where the Spanish GDP has been in the recent past, where the forecasters expect it to go, how the latest data point compares to all of these forecasts, and lastly, what types of risks could challenge the momentum of the undergoing recovery. So starting off by looking at the Spanish GDP data. Spanish GDP has been increasing since its recent lows in, let's say, early 2013, which were reached after a couple of years of consecutive decreases. This increase, compared to other peripheral EU member states like Italy and Greece, have been more pronounced. What are the forecasters saying about all these things? If we look at official forecasts, for instance, from the IMF World Economic Outlook database, which mention year-on-year GDP growth, we can see that Spain is on a positive trajectory, with 2015 being a particularly important year, as the year-on-year increase is projected at around 1.7%, compared to a 2014 increase of 1.3%. And I should highlight that this comes after 2 years, 2012 and 2013, of negative GDP growth. So this data was last updated on September 2014. We are all looking forward to see what the update is on this. And there's some more recent data from the European Commission's winter forecast, which are even more optimistic than that. And we're expecting an update on these forecasts on the 5th of May. Just as a reference, the GDP growth year-on-year for 2015 was forecasted by the European Commission to be at around 2.3%. Looking at some private sector forecasts, for example, Ernst & Young has a 2015 forecast of 2.4%, slightly higher than the European Commission's and quite higher than the IMF forecast. So where does this leave us? The latest GDP announcement of 0.9% is higher than analyst expectations, even marginally so, which was at 8.8% from the survey compiled by Bloomberg. And this definitely serves as a positive surprise. It has been the fastest rate of growth since the end of 2007, and it has been primarily boosted by a recovery in household spending. These positive news were also used by the Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy to increase his forecast of Spanish GDP growth to 2.9%, up from the 2.4% figure that had been announced last February. So this shows an increasing trend, which is affected by the latest news. The current quarterly rate implies a 2.6 year-on-year rise. This leaves Spain in a healthier state, let's say, in terms of year-on-year GDP growth compared to the UK and the US, and it indicates that we are closer to the Ernst & Young forecast of around 2.4%. QE effects are also accompanied by some positive effects that we are experiencing due to the structural reform program that Spain had to undergo. Are there any confounding factors to this recovery? Anything that makes the recovery vulnerable? Yes, there's always risks. What these risks are, I'd start off by saying the Spanish elections, expected for very late December of this year, they can have implications on political, economic, regulatory stability, which are all very important factors contributing to GDP growth.
Spanish inflation rate has reached 1% month on month, well above the forecasted 0.36%. How will this affect the rest of the euro area?
So with the Spanish inflation in HICP basis having been consistently negative on a month-on-month basis, and with the same holding for Greece and in the last 4 months for the Eurozone, and Spain having been experiencing a more pronounced deflation than the Eurozone, this comes as positive news. So Spanish CPI at 1% beats expectations, and HICP, at an HICP basis, it is also positive at 0.7%. To put this in context, euro area consumer prices were falling for the past 4 months, but following as a reaction potentially to the ECB's QE program, the latest announcement for Eurozone-wide inflation is that prices have remained flat. That was in line with the median estimates of the Bloomberg survey. So it appears that Spanish inflation has both beat expectations and is more positive than a Eurozone aggregate, which can be considered a positive sign.
French PPI was forecasted to increase to 0.4%. However, data released today shows PPI remains almost unchanged at 0.1%. Is this a positive as the economy appears stable, or is unchanged data a negative for France?
So, first things first, PPI increased at a substantially lower rate compared to its previous 0.7% monthly increase, but this is still better than the 0.9% decrease that was experienced 2 months ago. In any case, as I said before, 1 month figure is not enough to draw significant conclusions, but let's try to analyze the underlying dynamics. First of all, I'd like to talk about good versus bad deflation, because this is the territory we're in. We're at very low figures, which used to be negative 2 months ago. One has to consider the principle where good deflation arises when there exists a level of certainty in the economy, allowing positive economic activity to be reflected in lower prices as opposed to higher wages. That's deflation. On the other hand, what is more worrying is that for an economy distraught by uncertainty and instability, deflation could be motivated by lower aggregate demand, leading to a negative economic spiral. When examining information related to inflation, such as this, both on the consumer and producer side, one will need to explore key drivers in order to identify whether there is ever good or bad deflation. So the drivers of the French PPI, most major sectors were either stable or increasing, with only mining, energy and water exhibiting decreases in the range of -1%. This decrease was countered by increases in refined products, which were however not as large as the previous month, and thus we don't see the figure being higher and not closer to expectations. The prices, however, of all major sectors of the manufacturing industry increased, with the exception of the transport equipment, which was down slightly. This provides us some indication that even though PPI remained at close to zero levels, it raises no bad deflation considerations, since the lack of upward movement was not driven by manufacturing goods, but primarily by the energy sector.
That's great, thank you. Well, that's all for today, but check back tomorrow for more Dukascopy updates. Goodbye for now.